What started as a show about fearless fishermen battling the brutal conditions of the Bering Sea has slowly taken on a darker tone. Almost every season, tragedy strikes, whether it's death, disappearance, or someone ending up in jail. The list of misfortunes is long, from sudden collapses on deck to fatal overdoses and criminal charges. Some of the most iconic faces from Deadliest Catch have met heartbreaking, unexpected ends. The show has left behind a trail of death, destruction, and shattered lives. In this video, we're breaking down the real-life tragedies behind the scenes, starting with one of the most beloved captains, Phil Harris. The world these fishermen live in is unforgiving. Nothing is guaranteed, not a successful catch, and not even a safe return to shore. Yet some of the crew seemed invincible. Captain Phil Harris was one of them. Harris joined the show during its first season as the captain of the Cornelia Marie. Though his appearance was brief, it made a lasting impression. He had a commanding presence, confident, fearless, and seasoned. Fans loved him for his swagger, his gruff honesty, and his decades of experience. With a cigarette often dangling from his lips, he braved the dangers of the sea like a man who had nothing to fear. Phil's resume was impressive. He'd been working on boats since the age of 7 and started going on real fishing runs as a teenager. By the time he was 21, he was the youngest captain on the Bering Sea, operating his own vessel, the Cornelia Marie, out of Seattle. It's easy to see why so many believed nothing could take him down. After that short debut in Season 1, Phil returned in a major way in Season 2. Alongside his sons, Jake and Josh Harris, he quickly became a fan favorite and one of the breakout stars of the series. But fame came at a cost, and Phil had no idea how deeply the show would affect his family. More on that later. Phil was known for his relentless work ethic. He didn't believe in rest. There was always something that needed doing. Maybe he ignored his limits. Maybe he knew them and pushed past them anyway. But it eventually caught up with him. On January 29, 2010, while unloading cargo at port in St. Paul Island, Alaska, Phil began to feel unusually tired. The crew was filming for Season 6 at the time. Phil planned to head back to his hotel room to take some medication and rest, then return to work. The fact that he already had medication on standby raises the question: was he already sick? Let's rewind a bit. Before the tragedy struck, Captain Phil Harris had already been battling serious health issues. One of the major concerns was a blood clot that had blocked an artery in his lung, cutting off vital blood flow, although the exact cause was never officially released. Medical experts suggest that heavy smoking is a common culprit, and Phil Harris was a notorious chain smoker. Years of smoking had damaged the vessels in his lungs, making him more vulnerable to clots like this. This wasn't just a scare, it was serious enough to pull him off the water. During Season 4's Opelio crab season, Captain Harris was forced to step away from the helm. Even when Season 5 began, he still wasn't well enough to lead his crew back into the Bering Sea. Though he made a few appearances on the show, it was clear something wasn't right. Fast forward to January 29, 2010, after feeling unwell while unloading cargo in St. Paul Island, Alaska, Phil retreated to his hotel room. It didn't seem like a big deal at the time. Everyone knew he had medication for his condition. So when he didn't come out right away, no one panicked. The crew continued filming, but as time passed and Phil remained unseen, concern began to grow. Eventually, Steve Ward, the Cornelia Marie's second engineer, went to check on him. What he found changed everything. Captain Harris was lying on the floor, wasn't moving, but he was still conscious. Barely. The first thing he asked was for Steve to call his son Josh. When Josh arrived, he immediately knew something was horribly wrong. The left side of his father's face was drooping. His arm and leg on that same side were completely limp. Phil Harris, a larger-than-life fisherman fans thought was unstoppable, had suffered a massive stroke. Josh quickly called emergency services. Phil was airlifted to a hospital in Anchorage, where he was rushed into emergency brain surgery. The operation was long, and the prognosis was uncertain. After surgery, doctors placed Phil in a medically induced coma to give his brain time to recover. Then miraculously, he woke up. For a moment it looked like Captain Harris might pull through. He was alert, speaking with family and friends. But something was different. There was a heaviness to his words, almost as if he knew his time was running out. It felt like he was saying goodbye. Despite brief signs of improvement, things took a dark turn. On February 9th, just 9 days after waking up, Phil's brain began to bleed again. The damage was too extensive. And that day, at just 53 years old, Captain Phil Harris died. His death shook Deadliest Catch to its core. But more than that, it devastated his family. His son, especially Joshua, would carry the trauma and fallout for years to come, and as time passed, it started to feel like the Cornelia Marie itself was cursed, because not long after Phil's death, tragedy struck again with the death of another captain, Tony Lara. After Phil passed, Derek Ray stepped in to captain the Cornelia Marie for the remainder of Season 6, but Phil's sons Josh and Jake were determined to keep their father's legacy alive. Josh, especially, was driven. He worked hard, eventually taking over the helm and buying the boat with fellow fisherman Casey McManus. Together, they became co-captains. But just as it seemed things were starting to turn around, another storm was brewing in 2011. Things took another turn aboard the Cornelia Marie. Josh Harris, determined to carry on his father's legacy, made the difficult decision to find a new captain for the vessel. He reached out to a trusted family friend captain, Tony Lara. Tony wasn't a stranger to the Cornelia Marie. He had worked on the ship before and knew her inside and out. At the time, he was running his own freight and salvage business. But the offer to take the helm of the Cornelia Marie was too meaningful to pass up. He accepted. Tony made his Deadliest Catch debut midway through Season 7. He was dependable, familiar, and respected by the crew. On paper, everything seemed perfect, but things didn't go as Josh had hoped. Despite the history, the chemistry, and the hope for stability, Tony stepped down at the end of the season. No dramatic exits, just a quiet departure. There were whispers. Was the stress of the Bering Sea too much? Did something happen between Josh and Tony? No one really knows. Tony went back to his salvage company and focused on enjoying life. He had a love for motorcycles, especially Harley-Davidsons, and, in August 2015, he attended the annual Sturgis Motorcycle Rally in South Dakota. It was supposed to be a fun trip. But during the rally, tragedy struck. Tony suffered a massive heart attack and died suddenly. Just like that, another man tied to the Cornelia Marie was gone. Fans and cast members alike mourned his loss. Josh Harris, who had turned to Tony for guidance after his father's death, was once again faced with the devastating loss of someone close, and sadly, Josh had no idea that his own path would also be filled with heartache and misfortune. But before we return to Josh, we need to talk about his younger brother, Jake Harris. When Phil died, Jake spiraled. He tried to stay close to his father's legacy by continuing to work aboard the Cornelia Marie. But in 2012, Jake abruptly left the boat. No one knew exactly why. Was it too painful to be in the same space where he had made so many memories with his dad? Or was something darker going on? Jake left to work under the seasoned and charismatic Captain Sig Hansen aboard the Northwestern. He gave it a shot, but his inner battles didn't stay hidden for long. Every day was a struggle, and eventually Jake left Deadliest Catch entirely. The pain he carried had consumed him. In 2013, Josh revealed that Jake had been struggling with substance abuse. But Josh also made it clear his brother had to face those demons on his own. Was that fair? Jake's problems ran deep. In fact, they went all the way back to high school. As a teenager, Jake had been passionate about skateboarding. He wasn't the best, but he pushed himself hard, determined to succeed at something. That drive led to injuries, and those injuries led to painkillers. Opiates. That's where the addiction began. Jake eventually recognized he had a problem. In a moment of vulnerability, he turned to the one person he trusted most, his dad. Phil, ever the protective father, acted fast and sent Jake to rehab. When Jake returned, he wasn't healed, but having his dad around gave him structure and hope. Phil was his anchor, and when that anchor was gone, Jake was lost. It didn't take long for things to spiral. Not long after Phil's death, Jake was involved in a hit-and-run incident. He'd been driving under the influence, panicked, and crashed his car. Else, he was arrested and charged with DUI. Unfortunately, that was just the beginning. Jake's downward spiral was far from over. He admitted in an interview that after losing his father, he felt a deep, unshakable void inside. He tried everything to numb the pain, but nothing worked. Each attempt only pulled him deeper into darkness. Josh, burdened with keeping their father's legacy afloat, felt he had no choice but to let his brother find his own way out. But was that truly a choice or a painful necessity? Jake's story isn't over yet, because after that DUI, more heartbreak followed. The DUI incident was supposed to teach Jake about the consequences, but it seems he did not learn from it. Around this time, Derek Ray took over as the captain of the Cornelia Marie. While at sea, Ray noticed suspicious behavior from Jake and suspected him of drug use, especially after seeing Jake with equipment used to prepare drugs. Concerned about potential trouble with the authorities, Derek decided to report Jake to the police, despite the evidence of the equipment. The police stated there wasn't enough proof to charge Jake with a crime. Jake's problems escalated as he progressed from drug use to distribution, leading to a DUI and possession charge in 2019, resulting in a jail sentence. Since then, there has been limited information about Jake's situation and whether he can overcome his drug problem. On the other hand, things seem bleak for Josh Harris. As reports indicate, he is facing significant challenges, including attempting to sell his house and losing ownership of the beloved Cornelia Marie. Josh's journey included serving as the captain of the Cornelia Marie, becoming the co-captain alongside Casey McManus, and working on the Time Bandit under Jonathan Hillstrand, before becoming a co-captain of that ship. Despite his extensive experience and dedication to continue his father's legacy, Josh faced criticism for his work ethic and character, which eventually led to his dismissal from the show in 2022 in a shocking turn of events. It was revealed that Josh had been accused of sexually assaulting a 4-year-old girl in 1998 when he was 16 years old, due to DNA evidence processing delays. He pled to a lesser charge instead of waiting for the DNA evidence to be processed. Instead of facing a charge of raping a 4-year-old, Josh was charged with 4th-degree assault and 1 count of communicating with a minor for immoral purposes. This raises the question of whether the outcome was fair or if Josh manipulated the American justice system. In a departure from potential lengthy imprisonment, Josh received a 30-day sentence for each charge, along with 24 months of supervision and 150 hours of community service. Additionally, the judge mandated that Josh complete a 24-month sex offender program, prompting concerns about the severity of the punishment given the nature of the offense. The subsequent online resurgence of the case in 2022 led to Josh's dismissal from Discovery, with the network expressing shock and swiftly severing ties with him. Notably, all references to Josh were removed from the network's website, indicating the seriousness of the situation. While viewers have moved on from Josh's departure, there remains significant interest in another cast member, Todd Coutin. On February 26, 2021, Todd Coutin was aboard the fishing vessel Patricia Lee, handling an 800-pound crab pot, a task he was relatively new to despite the vessel's frequent use of such equipment. Having endured significant personal loss, including the deaths of his entire immediate family, Todd viewed this opportunity as a fresh start after a lifetime of hardship. Tragically, a devastating accident occurred when the 800-pound crab pot fell on Todd, resulting in fatal injuries. The news of Todd's condition deeply affected Captain Wild Bill Wachowski, who had developed a close bond with Todd during his burgeoning career in the fishing industry. The impact of Todd's death reverberated across the fishing and production crew, marking a profound loss within the community. Regrettably, the narrative takes an even more tragic turn, with the next event involving the fishing vessel Destination. Tragedies are not uncommon occurrences on the reality TV show Deadliest Catch. with some incidents deeply affecting even the most resilient individuals involved. The show premiered in 2005, and just a year later, on October 18, 2006, a significant event took place. The fishing vessel Ocean Challenger encountered a fierce storm while on the Bering Sea, leading to its tragic sinking and the loss of all but one crew member. 10 years later, in February 2016, the fishing vessel destination faced a devastating situation. Despite a successful morning of fishing, the ship became weighed down by 340,000 pounds of ice while sailing towards the shore, ultimately succumbing to the excessive weight and sinking. This led to the tragic loss of all crew members, including their captain Jeff Hathaway, who were never found and were declared legally deceased a month later. These heartbreaking losses deeply affected the other captains and crew members, marking the beginning of a series of tragedies on the show. Another potential tragedy was the situation surrounding Jake Harris, suggesting that his unresolved issues could lead to further troubles. Nick McClashen, a seventh-generation fisherman from the island of Coutin, Alaska, also faced significant challenges. Raised in a family deeply involved in fishing, Nick started working on vessels from a young age, eventually joining Captain Wild Bill's crew in 2011. Despite being an efficient deckhand and later a deck boss, Nick struggled with a severe and persistent problem, leading to his suspension from the show by Discovery in 2017. Following his time in rehab, Nick returned to the show in better condition. However, in 2021, Nick expressed his desire to travel to Tennessee, a trip approved by Captain Wild Bill. Unfortunately, this would be the last time Bill would see Nick, as Nick's journey to Tennessee would mark the end of his life, with his final moments spent in a hotel in Nashville. At the hotel, Nick succumbed to his inner struggles and turned to drugs, beginning a dangerous path of usage. Unfortunately, Nick spiraled out of control and consumed a lethal dose, leading to an overdose with no one present to assist him. Meanwhile, in Alaska, Wild Bill and his team were gearing up for the winter season when they received the devastating news of Nick's passing. Nick's sudden death deeply impacted Bill and the entire crew, as he played a vital role in the daily operations of their vessel. Not just as a colleague but also as a close friend. Bill grappled with feelings of responsibility, questioning if he should have intervened before Nick's fatal decision, but ultimately coming to terms with the irreversible outcome. The recurring drug-related tragedies among the show's cast members raised troubling questions about the prevalence of substance abuse and mortality within the context of the series. This pattern prompts contemplation on whether there may be an underlying issue or a sense of ill fate associated with the production, leading to speculation about a potential curse